Gentlemen, so we're here to talk a bit about storytelling for your brand, and I'm sure a bunch of you here are incredible writers and others are freelancers with less experience. Just to get a sense of the room, can we get a show of hands to anyone who's a professional writer or has taken a creative course? 1.5, okay. Just a quick show of hands of anybody who has to produce content or work for their business on a daily, weekly basis. Kind of everybody. So we're going to run through a little bit about the boys so you can get a sense of who they are. And then we're going to try and break it down into a structured chat, going through all the bits and pieces, hopefully, that you guys can relate to. So, Jamie, tell us a little bit about you and your background and why you're here as this amazing writer. Who the fuck are you?
So, my name is Jamie Millar. I am a freelance writer currently, but about a year ago I was on staff at Men's Health. I've been at Men's Health for about 3.5 years, and before that I was at GQ. I was at GQ for about 4.5 years. My background initially via GQ was mainly like men's style, fashion, grooming, watches, and then through Men's Health I got more into health and fitness, sports, and those are kind of my two main content streams that I sort of do now as a freelancer for people like Men's Health, Mr. Porter, Gentleman's Journal, Wired, various others, Soccer Bible. That's me.
Alex, you're slightly different tilts in terms of background, in terms of the type of content that you write.
Yeah, there's some specific things you want to talk about story-wise, but my background is sort of similar to Jamie's. I met Jamie at Men's Health. We worked together there for a few years. I was more of a features writer, so kind of that journalist who gets sent to do all the really stupid stuff and hopefully not get killed along the way. So yeah, I cut my teeth writing about going to orgies and taking lots of drugs and getting forcibly addicted to amphetamines for quite a few months. So that was my start, and then from that, yeah, it was all downhill from there. I guess what's more relevant is I moved into brand writing on the side when I became a freelance journalist. So, and now, I write for newspapers still, magazines still, but yeah, I work for brands like Guinness, I've done some work for Samsung, done some work for banks, bizarrely. So yeah, just sort of taking those skills as well.
Can you guess who's got the filthy mouth? Yeah, I didn't do it.
Guy in the middle.
Yeah, it's always the quiet ones. So I want to kind of get a bit of context about how this works. So you guys are getting a fair bit of work now from brands approaching you to produce content and produce work. Let's get a sense of what happens when you take on a new client. And let's talk a bit about the process as to what you would look for and how you guys start to kick off that relationship.
Well, it kind of varies on the size of the client. And obviously Alex has worked for some really big clients, and I think that tends to be more on a project-by-project basis. But for example, I've done a couple of projects recently with some smaller brands, a tailoring brand called Tom Sweeney, and a new brand, a new clothing brand called Corinthians. And yeah, the process there is I kind of go in, spend some time with them. I'll normally sit down and kind of do a sort of informal interview with the guys who run the brand and really just talk to them about what they think makes their brand so great. Because you can obviously, you produce marketing materials and things that you think get across the story of your brand. But if I ask you to explain your brand to me, you'll do it in a much more kind of engaging, evangelical way. You'll come up with some really interesting anecdotes and opinions and things that you wouldn't necessarily think to put into standard bit of kind of marketing club. So what I try to do then is kind of take all of that, might be narratives, conversation, and then sort of distill it down into something that then actually ends up as kind of a brand story that hopefully gets some of that across.
Okay. So Alex, when you're speaking to these guys for the first time, will you jot down keywords? Will you just try and transcribe everything they say? Do you record it? Give us an idea of kind of your process in terms of getting a clearer picture of a brand so you can start the story.
I think it's almost worth going a step back because the way Jamie and I work and why we're perhaps a little bit different is that we come to it like journalists. So before that, we're thinking more about the audience, like you talk to when you're an editor. It's always very important to understand who you're writing for. So it's kind of that beforehand and understanding really who it is the brand wants to speak to. know who their customer is. So before you even take any notes, I think that is the key for me. It's not just because a brand will tell you a lot about itself. You know, you speak to people and they have a very clear idea of who they are, but that's not necessarily who they think they are. Yeah, but that's not actually who they are. You know, ultimately to a consumer, I think there's a bit of a gap there.
Yeah.
I think that's where a journalist skill comes into it because you know our skill set is much more about the real person who's consuming this, and ultimately their product. But then it is very much about sitting down and then kind of marrying those two things. And a lot of the time it is sort of listening to keywords and what the brand is saying, but kind of trying to tell them that's not necessarily what they want to be doing, and it's a lot of compromise.
Yeah, I think having an external perspective, like Alex was saying, is really helpful for brands. Because I think sometimes when you're in your own kind of world, you're immersed in it, or you're working on this stuff all the time, you can kind of go down a rabbit hole of what you think your brand is and who you think you're talking to. But actually, somebody like us coming in from an external perspective, we can kind of say, well, actually, you think your brand is about this, but I think actually this bit over here is the interesting thing, and maybe we should focus on this. And also, like Alex says, it's about knowing who your audience is and then adjusting the way that you talk based on who that audience is.
Yeah, I think that's a salient point. And if you're very deep in your own brand, particularly if you're a freelancer or an individual, I guess as well, it's you in many cases who is the brand, and self-assessing that, I would imagine, is an incredibly tricky thing to do. What do you do if the brand is completely brand new and there's very little evidence for you to use? If you're starting from scratch, do you guys have a process to try and start to create that brand for somebody that doesn't have anything in place?
Well, the brand that I'm working on at the moment, Corinthians, is a clothing brand. I don't want to go too deeply into the history, but the original Corinthians football team was sort of like the Harlem Globetrotters of football, but in like the late 19th century. They went around the world playing football against everybody, spreading football around the world. Anyway, but they're making a clothing brand based on those guys and what they wore off the pitch. But that's a totally new brand. It doesn't exist. What it does have, though, is it has this sort of history, this background, this conversation that already exists. So we're looking to try and basically tap into that to try and then create an identity for the brand. But yeah, it starts with a conversation. It's basically just you look around, you look at other things that are out there. What kind of brands do you want to be aligned with, associated with? How are they talking? What kind of language are they using? How are they communicating? We'll go beyond just brands that are in the same sphere and beyond brands generally, and look at publications, any kind of writing that you kind of like or that you think has the right kind of vibe or tone. It could be totally unrelated, but just kind of put together a bit of a mood board, basically, of all the sort of things. We'll look at keywords that we want to use, but also maybe there are keywords that we don't want, that we don't want any association with. And then kind of from there, you just start to put something together, and then you refine it. It takes something like a brand story takes a while to really nail, because I've got an idea of what it might be in my head, they've got an idea of what they want it to be in their head, and you kind of need to meet in the middle. So there's a lot of back and forth, but hopefully you get there.
When does tone come into it for you, Alex? Like, when do you start figuring out what type of language you're going to use, what sort of style you're going to go for?
I think Jamie's mood boards comment is kind of relevant to that because a lot of it's like photographers and artists often will do this, where they'll use a lot of tears and references to come up with an idea for a shoot, and that's usually called like a mood board. But I think writing is the same. Creativity isn't like coming up with an idea from nowhere. It is like borrowing lots of different things. So I think when it comes to tone, it is working with the brand to understand what they like. And sometimes they might be wrong, and you might have to steer them to what you think the audience is. But it's usually creating a tone around, so like they like this website, they like this brand, what this brand did. And, you have to be very careful not saying we want to be like them, and then it becomes plagiarism. But I think there's no shame in like everyone wants to be like instant smoothies, whatever. There's no shame saying I like that conversational tone, but how about we bring in I like this thing from a website. I think that is where tone is constructed. But again, there is that battle for what we do with sometimes marketing departments where they talk about things like keywords, they talk about things like sales, and they want that in there. And I think you need to step away from that a bit initially and decide what your voice is before you start pushing sales, definitely.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the brand story, Jamie, can you talk a little bit about why that's important? What what happens with that? I mean, once you start to figure that out between you and the client.
It's everything, right? I mean, the brand story that is it. If you don't communicate the story, then people don't know who you are. They don't know what you're about. And it's absolutely the key thing. I mean, the word story is maybe, maybe evokes like a novel or something like that. It doesn't have to be a novel. A story can be something very, very short, but it has to tell everything that you want about your brand. And also, it's an emotive thing. Story. Like, stories are things that we care about. People love stories. Like, religions are founded on stories. We believe in things based on stories. So that story is really the key thing. And like I was saying before, if I ask you to tell me what your brand is about, you will talk effusively, passionately. Your language will be, you'll get me excited about it, jazzed up. But if your copy and your communication is not kind of doing that, then you're losing something straight away. And you're not going to. Everybody has so many. We have a huge surplus of brands to choose from nowadays. So many options. Why should we choose your brand? Because of the story. Because something in it resonates with us that makes us connect. And think, yeah, that's. I believe in that. I understand that about that. So yeah, it's the key thing.
Yeah, I want to ask about it. I think we'll jump into it a bit more later, but this idea of connecting and this idea of feeling that you're a part of something and becoming a fan of a company or a fan of a brand. I mean, how do you guys tap into that? I mean, are you conscious of that when you start talking to the client initially to say, right, we need to resonate with your audience through X, Y, and Z, or what's the process?
I think that, when we were chatting about this the other day, we were talking about authenticity, which is incredibly important at this sort of stage of the conversation. Where you might not be the type of brand that's going to have like a genuine fan, like somebody who wants to be known to love this brand. But at the same time, if you do speak in an authentic way, it could become a brand that people come to for information as well as a product. So I think it does come down to authenticity. If you're producing, if you have a strong story and you're producing good content some way or another, then people can, I think people will naturally gravitate towards that sort of brand more than a brand that's constantly just shoving sales pitches down your throat. So yeah, I think it definitely starts with that.
Do you have any clients, you don't necessarily have to name names, but maybe sectors that you've worked in where you're thinking, I mean, how can I squeeze something out of this?
Yeah, sometimes. And you'd be surprised actually, some even really huge brands that sell a lot of stuff already, when it comes to their communication, they're so unwilling to change or take risks or do anything interesting that you do sort of go out with banging your head against the wall and how you're not going to survive. Because everyone knows the way people consume information now is just moving at pace, and you need to stay on top of that. And there are a lot of brands. There's a brand I have in mind in particular I won't name. It's a very, very big shaving brand.
Like what sort of celebrities might endorse that?
Well, that's actually part of the argument having the other day, because they go into the next celebrity. I definitely can't tell you who that is. But, it's just like some tennis guy from the 90s, and it's very
blonde hair.
They're very afraid to do anything interesting. I think that's a real shame. And they pay a lot of money for people to write content for them, but they basically want people to write content for them like they were writing content 10 years ago. They're too afraid to do anything interesting. I think it's such a waste. So there are some brands you kind of, bang your head against the desk every morning.
And is that because they have quite a stern vision of what they want to do, or a rigid vision already in place, and you might want to be a bit more roguish about it, or try and even develop or progress them?
Not necessarily. I think there's, in a lot of particularly big brands, I think there's a lot of red tape, a lot of people need to go through. There's a lot of old people working there that just need to die. In a lot of these companies, and I think when you come up against that, and people come to Jamie often because we can communicate with millennials, or at least we think we can communicate with millennials. So there's a degree of that, and they're like, we've read some of your work, and we really like this, and it got lots of traction with this brand. Can we have some of that? It's like, yeah, cool, okay, so this is what we need to do. And they're like, great. No, we're just going to do the same stuff we've been doing for the last 10 years, well, thanks. And there's a lot of that where brands aren't. But that's why I think it's great working with new brands and young brands, or if you have a brand that's like a startup or your own brand. I think you should take risks, and I think you should look at now websites. I mean, it's really good to look at websites that are editorial based, journalism websites that do well, that resonate with people, that are going to be your consumers, because there you see the best example of how to talk to these people. And yeah, that's what I said. I think these brands are going to struggle in the future unless they get on board with that.
I'm glad you mentioned websites. I mean, just bringing the branding topic to a close slightly. I wanted to get your thoughts on how one would start to utilize the brand story or certainly some brand ideas onto the site. So I'd imagine most people here have a website, and the first thing that most consumers will see now will be your site, if not your social media content, but presumably that homepage has to connect quite quickly or you're off. Is there a technique that you guys use? Should it be content heavy? Should it be something simple? Is it case by case? Can you give us an idea?
In terms of like website design?
There's no, I think content is
wording on the website, I think.
There's an old journalism adage which I've always sort of stuck to, which is just write for an idiot at rush. Which is like one of the most practical. It sounds really patronising, but it's one of the most practical things you can do, because I think that's a big problem, especially when you're not a professional writer. You can end up too much to say, and you can really put people off. You have to keep in mind, you have to be honest with yourself about how you consume media. Like, we're all so impatient, you flick through things and you've gone, especially if it's a brand and you're not like inherently interested in it. So I think one of the most key things is just be so sharp with anything you write. Just write single core sentences, just like punchy, short sentences, like the most effective writing technique ever. It's very like American journalism style writing, but it's that is that's a tip I give every young writer I work with. It's just like cut it back and cut shit out and keep cutting shit out and make your sentences shorter and keep cutting shit out again and keep going until you've got like a couple of sentences that is just so raw and like powerful.
It kind of applies to everything though. Like, if somebody's coming to your website and they don't get what you're about, they don't get your story immediately, whether it's the font, the picture that you use, the words next to the picture that they speak to each other, it's stuff that we used to go through when we were doing layouts of magazine pages. Is it clear where I'm supposed to go? Is it clear what I should be reading first and what I should be reading next? If that's not happening, if that hierarchy's not there, then people will be lost. They won't understand what you're about. So it's got to be instantly digestible.
It's simple. I think simple is just like that is it. Just be really, really simple with everything you do, especially at that stage where you've got like half a second to grab someone's attention. Be really simple.
What I actually saying really reminds me actually. I was talking to somebody in space upstairs earlier about dissertations, and when I look back at my dissertation at university now, I did university, and it's so embarrassing. I literally I used the longest possible words I could find. Shift F7 every single word. It's like an episode of Friends where Joey writes a letter for the adoption clinic. It's like using the thesaurus on every single word. It's so embarrassing. And that's a prime example of a bad writing mistake a lot of people make, is they try and throw too much at it. Actually, the best writers, they strip stuff out and make it so simple, so digestible, because you don't need to. It just confuses things.
Good writing is just like really simple English used well, rather than like loquacious, like really complicated words. That's just waffle at that kind of communication.
Actually, on the school subject as well, I had a really great teacher, English teacher at school, who gave me a report one year, and the report said, generally very good, but has a tendency towards ponderous sesquipedalianism. So obviously I didn't know what the word sesquipedalianism meant, and I went away and looked it up, and it actually means the use of overly long words or phrases in order to sound impressive. Take one thing away from this.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just, when you said about keeping things as simple as possible, stripping things out, I wondered what your thoughts on Christopher Hitchens as a writer, because he's one of the few people who I've read where, I shit you not, the first 10 fucking pages I had to look up 31 words in the dictionary, and they were all beautifully chosen words, and it was more my ignorance than his use of it, but that's a prime example of someone not writing potentially simplistically, but it's still being really awesome.
I think there's obviously a bit of a difference between a Chris Hitchens novel and like a website landing page in terms of what you're doing. So I mean, don't get me wrong, like there is a joy if you're somebody who gorgeous on books. There's a joy in learning new words, and I certainly enjoy that. But I think in this kind of context, you have to be really honest with what you like, and talk about the internet as well, where you just like you're flying through things. You kind of got that Instagram mentality for everything, bold. And if you're going to try and grab someone, as soon as they've got a word they don't know in that situation, they're going to move on. And I think that's all about honesty with yourself, and I think that's what a lot of people need, a lot of brands need to do, and a lot of, like, even people in our industry, journalists need to do. Just think, like, how do you actually consume media? Do you read New Yorker articles, or do you scroll through BuzzFeed? Maybe you read New Yorker articles, great, most of it do, but
So I read.
you don't read at all.
To be honest, I haven't read enough Christopher Hitchens to really comment authoritatively, but what I would say is that I think it's one thing if you're using a word, because that's absolutely the most precise word to use in that case. I'm down with that, but eponymous as an example. Okay, I've never seen the use of the word eponymous where I didn't think it's just a bit pretentious. just a bit pretentious. So
I think it's across the lines as well for me, for like misunderstanding specifically in regards to online accessing information as quickly as possible. So it's part of me like not understanding the context you're referring to as well. That's why I brought it up.
Sure.
I think there's a tendency though for writers to want to show off sometimes, and it's a tendency that I suffer from a lot. And again,
You do something from that.
So, I tend to write too long sentences actually with too many clauses, but again, you have to really use your discipline and dial it back. Like Alex says, good writing doesn't have to be. Shouldn't be complicated.
And it's the same rule with metaphors. I think, like Jamie was saying about if you're using a word and it's slightly it's not a regular word, but it's a beautiful word and it's perfect for that that situation, then I think that's justified. And it's the same with metaphors. I think it applies to the same thing we're talking about now. It's like people use metaphors and similes in their writing a lot of time because they feel like using a fancy metaphor or simile in their writing, whereas it should be there to help someone understand something, or it's not poetry in this kind of context. So again, another really good rule for writers in this sort of area is just don't do it. Just do not write metaphors. Like maybe a simile if it helps illustrate something, but it's totally redundant and it's only going to confuse the reader at this stage. And most people aren't able to do it anyway. Just don't.
We're not left with many words now.
No, you plain words. Right.
Iconic. Don't use the word iconic.
We're down to 6 or 7.
Quintessentially as well.
Well, we see something a lot the community of, I imagine everyone in this room is relatively creative, and the temptation when you're a creative thinker and a right-sided brain thinker is to try and maybe be different or stand out from the crowd. And this idea of trying to write simply, I think, can sometimes be confused to be too simple, and you're not putting yourself out there or expressing your creativity. Do you guys find that? Is the advice still stop being pretentious and keep it simple?
I think simple. There's a difference between simple and bland. Like the thing, simple is a very loaded word, and it sounds like it's very basic and it's like childlike, but the opposite is true. So I brought up New Yorker. Then if you read a New Yorker article, I mean, arguably the best journalism you'll find. It's just very simply written. It's very to the point, and every sentence is direct, and every sentence has a point. It's not waffly. So I think that's more what we mean by simple. It's not what your point is, and just communicating that point, and not waffling, and always trying to strip back. And surprisingly, that does actually tend to create something that is more beautiful. And you can be creative, you can be beautiful with simple writing, and using nice words when no one calls for it, and not doing James' dissertation shit that's there and just trying to source everything. It's just simple sounds really negative. It's really not. It's just keeping it clean.
It's like in design. I mean, good design is simple and intuitive. That's Steve Jobs' whole thing. It takes a lot of skill and ingenuity to make it that simple, that intuitive. Writing should be the same.
Yeah. We're going to move on to a different topic, but anybody want to throw a question at the guys related to brand or related to any bits we've spoken about?
Yeah, I guess I don't know quite how to formulate the question, but the simpler we create the copy, and the more immediate we assume that it's going to be absorbed and understood. At what point does copy become inappropriate when we just go to images? Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously, there's a necessary need for copy to kind of to take people through the story, but we talk about homepage specifically.
Yeah.
Have you noticed, for example, in your work, that homepage copy has become less and less and less, and it's all image driven to get the nugget across?
Jamie and I have actually been having this conversation. So we're launching a website together at some point. We've been at some point.
I'll say it, it's called Fortis, because they won't say it.
Yeah,
I'll send you a link.
in the future.
It's a side project.
Yeah, it's just like project.
On the back of it.
Yeah, it's so happen. But we've been discussing homepage copy and heads and sales, and again, like because of our backgrounds, sort of, I say proper journalists, but magazine journalists, there is a temptation to write something really clever, and you're writing this ahead and sell. A sell is like the little description of what the page is.
I have a weakness for puns.
Jamie has such a weakness for puns.
It's my Shakespearean tragic flaw.
Such a
It's a way of saying Achilles heel.
Yeah. I'm so tired. So we've gone back and forth on this, and Jamie likes like a punny kind of like a bit of a joke. Whereas when it comes to homepage copy, I do actually prefer it very straight. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because of what we said earlier. I just think you've not got much time with people's attention. And I think if there's a place that's going to be really bold writing that is just explaining what happens when you click this and what you're going to see, I think you should keep it really straight. And if it's going to lead to an article, then yeah, your article can be beautiful. But I don't like homepages that try to be a bit clever, and sometimes you just don't know what the hell you're going to read, so you're going to read something else.
So there's different layers of the story, right? Again, go back to the sort of journalism. It's you've got the headline. The headline needs to grab, and the headline needs to be short, and the headline needs to be really simple. Then you've got the sell. The sell's a bit longer than the headline, but it's still relatively short. You can explain a bit more, hopefully enough to get them kind of interested. And then once you've got them past that point, then you get them into the copy, and then you can explain in detail. But you've got to go work your way through those steps first. That's why I think a good brand story, the brands that I've been working with recently, I almost start with actually I almost go the other way around and start with a bit of story, and then kind of distill that right down to a sell, and then actually you can distill that down to like a slogan that kind of just sums up, one line thing. So yeah, it's about grabbing that attention, and then you can draw them in. Once you've got them, then you can give them the beautifully written anyway.
Cool. Anyone else?
Today's consumer actually read them. Are they actually reading content? Because what I find is they don't want to read.
Really
Who
awesome.
wants to read them?
Yeah,
They've got
that's right.
Snapchat, they've got Instagram as well.
Yeah, I mean you can't argue with Snapchat and Instagram just how more people are doing that a lot more obviously than what they are reading long articles. But I think there's still definitely a place for it. Absolutely. I mean I don't know whether you read or not.
I do, but
Yeah.
today's consumer.
No, I think today's consumer does, but to a degree, but in a slightly different way, especially like the millennial generation, of course. But there is still so I work for a website called Ice and Ivy, and they aimed at a younger audience. And they have long reads and stuff like that on there, and these guys were they're always obsessed with Snapchat and Instagram, it's that kind of age group. But they still read something if it's relevant, it's interesting.
They're going to catch you with like a celebrity or a music something.
Yeah, I mean, entertainment in that sense is obviously more relevant. But I think it really depends. And I'm not delusional. I know that people do like to look at pictures, much more than they do to read long articles now. But there are still people reading articles. Otherwise, people wouldn't be getting paid. It's very metric-driven. These sites and brands are very aware of how many people are looking at their websites and dwell time, like how long people are spending reading things. And it's a bit of a sweet spot at the moment with websites where they seem to think 1,000-word articles is kind of the sweet spot because people stick around for those. When they're short, they think they're a bit throwaway. When they're too long, they find them impenetrable. So 1,000-word articles seem to be getting quite a lot of traction at the moment.
That's a good point as well. Again, there's a lot of talk and content about, there's emphasis on the amount that you produce and how quickly you produce it and bashing it out and make it short, make it digestible, make it bite-sized, whatever. And I think, yeah, that's true to an extent. But also, you'll build the kind of audience, you'll get the kind of audience that sort of content attracts. Whereas actually, if you take the time to build something deeper and put some more effort into it, and also make it something that people actually want to read and care about, that is actually going to be of some service to them. I mean, something that was really drummed into us at Men's Health was service journalism benefit. Like what's useful to the person reading this? What are they getting out of this? How are you helping them with this piece of information? How is it benefiting their lives in some way? Like if you take the time to actually craft something that really is going to help them and improve their lives, and they will appreciate that.
Or something like that.
But yeah, I mean that's a good Men's Health example. If you're going to be anything that's useful, You know, if a reader feels, I mean, you look at any, you know, you look across media and websites as well, content that does really, really well, stuff that people follow. And it's like recipes, like, I mean, BuzzFeed have completely basically taken over recipes now with that, what's it called? BuzzFeed food thing? I can't remember.
BuzzFeed.
Yeah, tasty, yeah. It's like,
Why is it not called BuzzFeed? What the hell?
this is why I wrote it.
I can feel the pain. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked that question. It's nearly identical to my next question. And I scratched it out because I felt it was too jargon heavy, but clearly we have an audience for it. It's like, I'm going to read exactly what I wrote, and then I'm going to tell you what I wrote in brackets. So I've said, how are today's consumers absorbing their content online? In brackets, what are we reading? So what are we reading? What are we watching? How are we taking in our content now? What are you guys seeing in terms of trends? Even to do with algorithms that Facebook are using to put content in front of us versus the amount of seconds we're spending on, say, a YouTube clip with suggestions. Talk to us a bit about consumption and whether you guys see any patterns or what's happening now.
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously there's this again, there's this stream of content that's being pushed out to people all the time. You know, people scrolling through their feeds, whatever, where they're looking for the quick thing. You know, people are looking for the thumb stoppers to get you to stop scrolling, whatever. And there is that absolutely that audience there, and there are people who are trying to feed that audience. And maybe if you're a really big brand, or maybe if you're a really big publication like the Daily Mail or whatever, you know, you can have that kind of audience where you're banging out content to them every 2 seconds. But I think the reality is for most smaller brands and most smaller publications, you can't compete with that. You can't have Daily Mail to Daily Mail. So actually go the other way. Like, there are still people out there using things like Google to find stuff out that they want to find out. You know, and there's this idea I've always found really mystifying. I come from a sort of digital background, and we've been working for print publishing houses like Condé Nast, and I always found it really weird that there was this idea that print was somehow really permanent, and digital was somehow really disposable and like throwaway. And it's like, actually, the total opposite is true. Like, throw away newspapers and magazines. You do not keep them as it is a fucker to try and move house with those things. But like, literally, you put something on the internet, it is still there 5 years later, 10 years later. It is still there. Somebody can find it. So I think actually a really good game for smaller brands and publications and writers to do is to just think about building, we used to call it evergreen content, but things that are still going to be, you know, if you're going to spend your precious finite resources making something that people still want to look at in 6 months' time, a year's time. You know, there are people trying to play that immediate reactive game, and yeah, good luck to them. But that's not a game that everybody can play. And actually, I think there are a lot of big wins to be had by taking the time to create things that people will find. And you know, a lot of the websites that we work for will focus on articles they know will build up. They'll sit there, you know, on the internet, and they'll build up really big link equity through Google, and actually they'll get a huge amount of, you know, even some of the editorial publications that work for websites. You know, there'll be like a few random old articles that were done in like 2008 or whatever that's just pulling in like 50% of the traffic that they advertise each month to their advertisers, because it's just been there and it's picked up the link equity. So,
and Google's so smart, like, you know, going on that, and like there was an update recently that really shifted the focus on how articles are sort of ranked, and it kind of put a bit of a, I mean, BuzzFeed are fine obviously, but that style of content wasn't really favoured, that kind of throwaway content. Now things that, like Jamie says, you build up a link equity, if there's like an authority there, and lots of other, if people share this article a lot and people link this article a lot, Google think, well, this website is authoritative, you know, people like reading this, so therefore it gets a high rank. So it's not just about, you know, yeah, everyone seems to want to do that BuzzFeed one, still start doing things because it was really effective. But like as Jamie says, you can't out Daily Mail, and you can't out BuzzFeed, you know, it's not going to happen. So I think it is much more about, you know, if you're a brand in particular and you want to consume, you want to communicate with the consumer in a certain way, to do that in a genuine way, and to create something the consumer's really going to be into, who's going to share and tell their friends about, and it gets lots of clicks, it gets lots of links, and then that ultimately, in the long term, will rank much higher.
I had a really good editor. His background was in tech. He worked for like CNET in San Francisco. And he came from a sort of Silicon Valley background, but he had this saying that the web publishes the general and rewards the specific. So if you can find like a really niche topic, a really specific topic that you know about, that everybody else knows about quite as well as you. Just absolutely hone in on that, because the thing is, it might be a niche, but it's a niche of like 6 billion people, and that's actually a pretty big audience. Whereas if you're writing about the same things that everybody else is writing about in the same way, then you get lost.
Do you think we're, as consumers, becoming more aware of marketing techniques?
Yeah,
so.
yeah, we are. But I don't know if that's necessarily a problem. I think people just want stuff to be good at the end of the day. Like, we've all seen adverts that we really liked, that we thought were amazing. It's just about whether it's good or not. And I think again, what I was saying before about service, I think if you're putting content out there, I think it's a really good idea to sort of don't try and sell all the time. Like, try and put some information out there that's going to help your audience, and don't give the kind of the heavy sell, because you can build up a lot of people will kind of grow to like your brand as an authority and have positive kind of feelings towards your brand without you having to like ram the sales message down their throat at every single. It's like having a conversation with, if you've ever done sales, I don't know, but you have a conversation with somebody first, you chat to them about stuff, you give them some advice, even if you're just recommending the things that you get the most profit margin on. I used to work for a mobile phone shop. You give them advice first, when you're trying to you at least look like you're trying to help them, and then maybe then you mention things to sell.
And what about things like clickbait or memes? I mean, how do you guys feel about their purpose online, or even their relationship to a business? Are they worth investing time in?
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously they are. I don't particularly enjoy them personally, but
I enjoy memes.
yeah, you do that. Yeah, no, I think that, again, it's, if you're talking about being honest about how you consume media, I think like memes, for instance, like everyone shares a meme that they think is funny. The problem is, I think if you're trying to own that as a brand, you try and create a meme, I think people see through that very quickly. So I don't know if that's really gonna. I think as a brand, I think you can be, if you feel like it's right for your brand, you can definitely share memes with your audience and be quite active on social media in a much more genuine way. But I think you've got to be really careful about trying to create that kind of stuff for yourself, because it comes back to people being wise to marketing techniques. I think if a meme is like kind of selling something, I just don't think that works. In the same way with like hashtags, when brands create like really long, awful hashtags that no one's ever going to use, and they're like wondering why they're not getting those interactions. So, well, it's kind of obvious, really.
Yeah, and it's not the point of a hashtag. I think the point of a hashtag there is to like get in on another conversation that a lot of people are having, not create a conversation that 5 people are looking to dive after that.
Yeah, a really good example is this is terrible cultural touch points here, but if you look at like Great British Bake Off compared to like X Factor, so the Great British Bake Off hashtag is just GBB or whatever it is, right? Really simple, really short. It's what everyone uses. They're aware of that, and that's just all they put up on the screen. Whereas with X Factor, I don't know if they still do this, but when I used to catch a bit of it, they used to like try and put these like really elaborate hashtags on. If something had happened, something about someone's hair or whatever, and you've got 8 words long, and no one would use it. And if people did use it, it'd be people saying like, "Fuck off X Factor, I'm not. Don't tell me what hashtags to use." Right?
Yeah.
And I think that again, that's like, if you're going to play those kind of games, I think you have to do it in the way that is right for them, the way they will interact with it, or they'll do it themselves, rather than just trying to create like hashtags or memes. It looks naff, and I think people are aware of it.
Yeah. I'm instantly regretting my ClubHouse Masterclass.
What? It's like,
I mean, how many letters is that?
but okay. So as an example, has anybody used that hashtag?
I don't even think I mentioned it. Did I?
Max
Yeah.
Weird one.
My marketing guy.
Yeah,
is fired.
say fuck off.
Yeah, that should have been the hashtag. I mean, the fucking. Of course, yes.
So with content, when you're writing your own possibly really badly written blog posts, for example, so I write a lot about health, and I am science degree trained, so I'm inbuilt to have a reference list to prove that what I'm saying isn't just Daily Mail when I'm talking about different topics. Do you think the consumer cares that I've read scientific research papers and what I'm writing about? Should I have a reference list? Should I not? Should I have the option that people can go and link out to them?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, authority is huge, especially on the web. You know, it's the Wild West, and especially if you're a small brand or you know, an individual writer with a blog. People don't know who you are. They don't know if your content is trustworthy. So I think any way that you can show them that you are is useful. That actually kind of connects to the obscene slogan that we sort of put up there, which does actually have a point. But I don't know if you want to explain it. It's Mikey's.
Yeah. No, it was an old deputy editor that Jamie and I both worked with a few years ago. Had this old saying. I think he picked up from a university lecturer, which was just you get it written on copy sometimes and feedback, and he would just say, "The fuck you." And that is, you know, that wasn't him just being a dick. That was, you know, quite important because it was just reminding you that the consumer doesn't really know who you are, doesn't care who you are. So you need authority in some way or another. In any, especially health stuff, you know, because we used to do similar things, and we were like, you know, spent all our days trawling health journals for studies, and you know, kind of feel your pain there. But that was kind of the crux of what you meant, is that, you know, you shouldn't be telling me this as a journalist. As a journalist, you're nobody. You know, as a copywriter, you're fucking nobody. I don't care about you. Who's telling me this? What doctors tell me this? What experts tell me this? What study has proven this? So that's one type of authority. I mean, you can have your own authority, of course, and more individual brands or influencers have their own authority based on their persona, and people buy into that to a degree. And it's just a different type of authority. But I think ultimately in your position and what the kind of content you're writing about, I think definitely. And health is, you know, there's so much, you know, shit out there, like health content, you know, and it's all like witch doctory and nonsense. So if you can actually cite studies and you know how to do it properly and they're relevant, then yeah, I think that's great.
I think it's actually really good. It's a good shit test for what you're producing, but it's you kind of flip it around and actually, if you're wondering about what kind of content to produce, like you need to make a blog post or whatever for your website, and you don't know, I think it's worth really thinking about, okay, well, you know, who are you? Like, what areas do you know about? What areas do you have expertise in? What things could you explain to people that they don't have, you know, have knowledge of the inner workings of? Maybe you know a sort of a supply chain really in depth, you know, maybe you can, I don't know, but it's, what can you be an authority about, and then be an authority about that, and that will have a trickle-down effect how you feel about your product.
Yeah, we talked a bit about this when we tried to come up with a context for this talk, but the idea that we were talking about was editorial versus promotional content, and this idea of how long do you need to build yourself up. I mean, we all run businesses and we all need to make a profit at some point in theory, but equally you don't want to sell out and kill your brand or lose integrity. I mean, you guys obviously come from an editorial world, and I presume that your take on this is to be as non-promotional as possible, but when does that come into your thinking? When a brand says, why aren't you making any money?
About stage we've taken a paycheck and gone, so that's fine. No, I think it's a lot like, I think it's a good balance, a good mix. I think when we say more about not shoving the hard sell down people's throats straight away, it's having that balance. Because I think if you want an audience, I think brands these days need an audience. I think that's a very important part of you know, that sort of brand consumer relationship. Is every brand is almost its own publisher now. You know, you have a website, you have social media, you know, you have Facebook, and most brands are posting some sort of content. And I think because of that, and because of the way consumers interact with brands now, I think if they're following you on Facebook, and every day they turn on Facebook and there's like a sales pitch, it's going to piss them off, and they're going to unfollow you and maybe stop buying from you for whatever reason. So I think it's knowing how to balance that. So I think it's more about giving genuine content that may be of interest. You can sort of get a good idea of, you know, because of your product, what might interest you as a consumer. And then weaving in the sales pitches, or being more honest with the sales thing, it's just a sales thing, in around content, which I think people would take, you know, quite happily over, you know, just constant sales pitches, which is just, you know, like again, being honest with how you consume it yourself. If you're on social media every day and it's just streams of, you know, buy this, or you know, you click like a clickbait article and you think it's something that's actually just information about a product they're trying to sell, you know, you're just going to be pissed off, and that's dangerous.
A good example, I did a project recently with a tailoring brand called English Cut, and they're a very small brand, but you know, Savile Row based. The guy used to be the head cutter at Amazon Shepherd. A big part of their business actually came from, nobody really knows about them. They don't do a lot of advertising or whatever, but actually a really, really big part of their business came from this guy, Tom. He started a blog. It was just a really honest, straightforward blog about, you know, this is back when like blogs were brand new. it was all about the ins and outs of tailoring. And he would do articles about, bespoke process, how it really works. When tailors say this, what do they actually mean? How do they cut corners? He would review some of the tailors on the row, whatever. And he didn't have any sales pitches in there. He wouldn't say things like, I'm the best and I'm better than these guys. He was just really, really honest. Just gave a lot of information, useful information that people couldn't find anywhere. And he got a load of sales through it that basically powered his business for the next decade. Even though, like I say, he doesn't advertise, you won't see him in the pages of GQ. Just because he's given people good information seemingly without any kind of agenda. But people like that, and then they feel, so then when they do decide to buy a bespoke suit, 5 years later, they go, oh yeah, I remember that guy.
Do you think you almost have to earn the sales pitch?
Yeah.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. I think in this world, if you're looking, say for instance you're posting articles on Facebook and things like that, I think you could almost give yourself a rule of 4 articles and sales pitch, something like that, if you wanted to. But I think it comes back to that authenticity, that trust. If that's the way you're operating, and maybe you're not. Maybe you have none of that stuff. Maybe you have no social. Maybe you don't do any content. Fine. But if you do, I think it is about just luring people in with a bit of authority and a bit of trust. And I think you have to do it in a genuine way. Luring is probably a terrible term.
Yeah.
It needs to be more genuine than that.
And then stab them in the back.
Yeah, with a sales pitch.
There's something that we spoke about a little bit, which I think we all agreed that we liked, was a couple of examples of guys who were selling in the most transparent way possible. They were putting their hands up and saying, "This is a sales pitch. I'm about to sell you something." But they had built up so much trust and integrity through their editorial work and all that free content that you'd been enjoying for the past few months that you're happy to listen to it and probably happy to buy into it. Which goes into our influencer marketing conversation, which is a different day. But do you think that's maybe the way to go for the majority of brands? Is don't presume people are just going to want to buy your stuff because you have 50% off. Rather, build up some integrity first, build up some trust, and then you can be as honest as possible instead of chucking in a call to action at the end of one of your.
Just building an audience is so powerful, because once you have an audience of followers, then you can get them to do stuff. Again, that sounds like a cult or something. But it is, brands do have cults nowadays. But I think somebody who I really like, I'm a big fanboy of Tim Ferriss. He's a kind of author, podcast guy, but he built up a huge audience just by doing really, really great content online, predominantly, giving people advice about how to do things, investigating things for people. And now when he says, I've got a new ebook or whatever, or a product, whatever, everybody buys it instantly because they believe in him, they believe his recommendations. And I think if you can build up that authority of being trustworthy, it's so powerful.
Right. Anybody want to ask the boys anything at all? Yeah.
How much do you factor in kind of keywords, I guess, for SEO?
SEO.
Yeah, into your content.
That really depends on the brands. Yeah, it really depends. Do you mean more brand editorial? Or both?
Content, I guess.
Yeah.
I've got a journal on our website, and obviously it's pretty much there to get more people onto the website, really. So.
It's very tricky, especially if it's a small website, and it's so hard to play the SEO game. I don't know what your brand website is, but you can load things with keywords and it'll just read horrible, and it's not going to rank high enough anyway. So you kind of but it is a consideration sometimes. But to be honest, it's more editorial stuff that we think about that. Well, I do anyway. I don't know about you, but when I'm writing something for a magazine website that is quite Google likes anyway, then you can kind of play the keyword game a bit more. But it comes back to Jamie's kind of niche thing as well. If it's quite a niche area, then keywords can be useful because you almost you do read a lot of headlines and sales that are almost just like a question that somebody types into Google essentially. But if you have a really niche brand, then you can probably do that. But if you have a brand about recipes or something, you can put all the keywords in the world, but everyone's probably still going to find deep secret food and doesn't do those, kind of fighting losing battle there. And then you need to go through social media and stuff like that and build audience and drive people to your content. But I think it depends on the issue you are.
Getting links, though, again, as I mentioned earlier, but getting links back from other websites is a really good way of building that authority. If you have a network of people, or brands maybe in a similar area, or influencers, people who have their own can't. Google's better now than it used to be at getting rid of the kind of spam content. I remember the old days when you used to search for stuff and like the description you would get under the search result would be that you get a list of words with like commas between them, but it doesn't really work anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Easy though.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Can we get a big thank you to the two boys, to Jamie and we're going to stick around if you like for a little bit to meet each other and say hi, and all those too shy to put their hand up and go and speak to the guys now. But thank you so much for listening. Cheers.
Yeah.
Yeah.